Hey guys, how we doing? Hey, thanks so much. Glad to be here. If you're watching on Facebook Live, they got free donuts today, and that's why they're excited. In 10 minutes, somebody's gonna show up at your house with donuts too. I'm joking, we're not. We love you, but just not that much. Okay, hey, my name's Josh, and I'm new here. So excited to be here. If you're brand new and this week's your first week, welcome. Please, let's meet each other after service because I need someone to be new with, all right? Meeting in the lobby. My family and I are so excited to be a part of Compass Roanoke. You guys have been so gracious and encouraging and welcome and friendly, and we just can't wait to get moved over here. Right now I'm commuting from McKinney. On Tuesday, it took me an hour and 40 minutes to get here in the morning. So pray for your boy. Just a couple of weeks though, and we'll be moving over. So we're in this series called Dark Horses, and we're in week 5. Next week, we're gonna wrap it up. Today, we're talking about a guy named Daniel. But before we jump into Daniel's story, you know, when I moved to Texas, my wife and I did, about 9 years ago now, we learned something about Texas that if you grew up here or you've been here your whole life, you probably don't know this. So let me help you. If you're a transplant, you totally are gonna get this. Texas is different. It's like living in a different country. In fact, somebody told me after the last service that Texas was the best country on the planet. And there are things about Texas when you move here that you have to change about yourself, and you really don't have an option, right? When you move to Texas, you have to like Whataburger. It's just the thing, like you have to, right? When you move to Texas, you have to join the cult of Buc-ee's. It's a cult, right? It's not a store, it's a cult. They want all of your money, and they get it, right? When you move to Texas, you have to like all of the teams in Dallas. It's not an option. I know, right? And that's what we do to all of our teams in Dallas. We love them, but we boo them. And we shame them and mock them, and that's just a part of being a Texan, right? So here's the deal. I learned that pretty quickly. My citizenship of the United States of America and my citizenship of the state of Texas kind of overlap each other, but sometimes there's tension between the two, right? And we all know which one wins that tension, right? It's Texas, y'all, right? So here's the deal. As a person of faith, we live in that same tension. I don't know if you ever thought about that. You have dual citizenship right now if you're a person of faith. You are in the United States of America as a citizen, but you're also a citizen of the kingdom of heaven that goes on and on and on forever. Eventually, one day, you will not be a citizen of the United States of America because kings and kingdoms will pass, but the kingdom of God will be forever. And so as we live as citizens of the kingdom of heaven, there is a time in our existence, I don't know if you know this or thought about this, maybe you're brand new to faith or brand new to church, but you will live somewhere forever, right? And so as our time here kind of dissipates and we move on, we will live as people of faith and as Christ followers, as citizens of the kingdom of heaven forever. And here's the deal, there's tension sometimes in those dual citizenship. Sometimes one pulls on the other, and we have to decide as people of faith which one is going to be the loudest voice, which citizenship is going to take precedent in my life. In other words, when culture demands one thing but faith demands another, which one wins for me, right? Or maybe put it this way, when my politics don't line up with my faith, does my faith change to fit my politics, or do my politics change to fit my faith? That's another message for another day. But we live in this tension, right? Of being kind of having dual citizenship. So what we've said about dark horses, this is a series called Dark Horses, and here's what a dark horse is. A dark horse is a little known person, unlikely to succeed, who ultimately accomplishes great things. A little known person, unlikely to succeed, who ultimately accomplishes great things. And I can't think of anyone in the first half of the Bible, which is called the Old Testament, who fleshed this out, lived this out, had to deal with this tension of living in two kingdoms more than Daniel. So let me give you a little bit of story about Daniel. If you don't know his story, or maybe you've heard Daniel and the Lion's Den, right? There's so much more to Daniel's story than that. So let me give you a little backstory. Daniel was a Hebrew young man, and he was born in Jerusalem, in and around Jerusalem. And in 605 BC, the Babylonians came in, they conquered the Hebrew people, the Jewish people, and they were led by a guy named Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar, actually, in fact, this is kind of interesting when I was studying this, Saddam Hussein, who was the dictator in Iraq, actually patterned his leadership after Nebuchadnezzar and was quoted to say that he wanted to be a modern day Nebuchadnezzar. So that's who this guy is. You can kind of get a picture now of who he is if you know who Saddam Hussein was. When Nebuchadnezzar would come in and take over a city or a people or a country or town, he had a strategy that was very unique. He would take the best, the brightest, the smartest, the most well-fed, the most well-educated, the fittest young men in the community, and he would immediately exile them to Babylon, and he would put them in this kind of indoctrination system where he would literally change the best Jewish people, if you will, to become the best Babylonians. And if he could permeate culture into the Jewish ranks with former Hebrew Jewish people who are now real strong Babylonians, he could eventually wipe out the memory of the Hebrew culture and Hebrew people, and it would be Babylon for generations. That was his plan. And so what we see is in the story of Daniel, Daniel is one of these young men, and some of his friends are too. So let's jump into Daniel chapter 1, verses 3 through 5. Here's what it says. It says, when the king ordered Ashpenaz, his chief of staff, to bring to the palace some of the young men of Judah's royal family and other noble families who had been brought to Babylon as captives. Select only the strong, the healthy, the good-looking young men. If you're looking for a picture, okay. Make sure they're all well-versed in every branch of learning, are gifted in knowledge and good judgment, are suited to serve in the royal palace. Train these young men in the language and literature of Babylon. The king assigned them a daily ration of food and wine from his own kitchens. They were trained for 3 years, and then they would enter into royal service. So basically, King Neb's trying to create a whole group of Jason Bournes. That's nutshell. That's what this says right here. So Daniel is 16 at the time, 17, somewhere in that area, but he's really bright, really, really smart. And Daniel sees what's going on behind the scenes. Daniel notices, okay, I understand what this guy is trying to do. He's trying to change who we are. He's trying to change every single thing about us. He's going to change our dress, our outfits. He's going to change our hair. They would shave their heads because Babylonian men, like bald was hot. And so if you're bald in the room, you're just born in the wrong time in the wrong country. Babylonian men wore earrings, and so that's what they did. They would shave their head, they'd change their diet, they'd change their outfit, they would teach them Babylonian language, they'd put earrings in their ear, and Daniel noticed, wait. You're trying to erase my identity. You're not just trying to change my lifestyle, you're trying to change who I am to the core. And for Daniel, like that was just way too much. And so the story goes on in Daniel 1, 6 through 7. It says, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were 4 of the young men chosen, all from the tribe of Judah. So these guys would have known each other. They would have had relationships. So the chief of staff renamed them with these Babylonian names. Daniel was called Belteshazzar, Hananiah was called Shadrach, Mishael was called Meshach, and Azariah was changed to Abednego. Okay, now for us, that's not a big deal. They're changing their names. For us, all that would mean is like, you got to change your monogram pillows, you know? Not a really, I mean, we may like our name, but it's not really that big deal. But to these guys, see, if you're born in Hebrew family, you're given a name by your parents that they believed came from God. And that name was your destiny. Whoever your parents named you to be, that was their belief, was that God gave them that name, and that was who you were going to be, whatever your name meant. And so here come the Babylonians, and not only are they changing the way they dress, what they do, their diet, their language, their look, now they're attacking their identity. Now they're attacking who God said they were. Now they're coming at who they were created to be. And so look at these names. This is so powerful to me. Daniel, his name in Hebrew, the name was given to him by his parents, meant God is my judge. They changed it to Belteshazzar, which means lady who protects the king. Yeah, that's a problem, right? Hananiah, his name meant Yahweh has been gracious. They changed his name to Shadrach, which means I'm fearful of God. You see what they're doing? Now they're attacking how these young men see God and how they see themselves. And the most important decisions you'll ever make in your life is, who is God and who does God say that I am? They're attacking these two fundamental core beliefs. Mishael meant who is what God is. In other words, there's no one like our God. They changed his name to Meshach, which means I'm despised and shameful before God. Now they're trying to say that I'm going to attack how you see your relationship with God. This is deep psychological warfare. And then there's Azariah, who meant Yahweh has helped. They changed his name to Abednego, the servant of Nebo, which was like a Babylonian god. So you see what's happening here. All of their names used to be attached to who God was, who God said they were, and their relationship with God in their life. And now they're trying to change every single bit of that, because here's what Nebuchadnezzar knew. Nebuchadnezzar knew that the quickest way to forget what God says about you is to focus on what others say about you. The quickest way to forget what God says about you is to focus on what others say about you. And that's exactly what Nebuchadnezzar was trying to do. He was trying to change how they saw themselves. Because he knew that if I can change the way you see you, I can get you to do anything I want you to. If I can get you to change how you see yourself, your inner monologue, I can get you to do anything I want to do. This is called normative conformity in psychology. Essentially what that means is that eventually over time, if we feel hopeless, a temporary stop will become a long-term stop. We'll fall into something, make a mistake somewhere, have an event happen in our life, and for the rest of our life, that thing will define us. But Daniel had to learn the lesson. Daniel had to learn, and so did these young men, you got to be real careful what you allow to define you. If your job defines you, if your career defines you, if your money defines you, and your house defines you, you will serve those things for the rest of your life. If free will and luxury and leisure and doing whatever you want and coming and going as you please defines you, then you will serve that for the rest of. If your kids define you, then you'll serve them for the rest of your life. Whatever defines you, you'll serve, you'll bow down to. And that's exactly what Nebuchadnezzar was trying to do. And that's exactly what fear tries to do. That's exactly what failure tries to do. It tries to define us. It kind of looks like this. So it's easy, like with debt, for example, if you fall into a certain amount of debt, to just let it snowball. Like a little bit of debt leads to a little more debt, and then you're like, what's another $100? And before long, it's what's another $250, and before long, it's what's another $1,000, until debt now becomes your norm. Okay, maybe that didn't work. Let's talk about brownies. So one brownie, you're like, I'm on a workout plan, I'm dieting, I'm trying to get healthy, I'm trying to eat right, but it's one brownie, what does it matter? And then it's 4 brownies, and then it's a tray of brownies with a pint of ice cream, and then it's jogging pants all day and a friend's marathon. Like, you see, now that's who you are. It's not what you did. It's not an event that happened to you. Now it defines you, and it is the thing that will get your loyalty and your allegiance for the rest of your life. So this is called compromise. Compromise, you've learned this, you've experienced this. If you haven't, find somebody in the room with some gray hair on their head, and they will tell you that this is true. Compromise does not erase tension, it only weakens your resolve. It only eats away. When I feel the need to get that thing, even though I'm in debt, and I just buy it anyway, swipe the card. When I feel the need to have that thing, even though I know I'm on a workout plan, I just anyways. It doesn't make the tension of needing and wanting those things go away. It only weakens who I see that I am. It only weakens my identity. It only weakens my confidence. And that's exactly what Nebuchadnezzar wanted to do to these young men. But here's what Daniel knew. If that's the bad news, there's good news. What Daniel knew is that if the quickest way to forget what God says about you is to focus on what others say about you, then the quickest way to forget what others say about you is to focus on what God says about you. That's the quickest way to do it. The quickest way to forget what fear says about you is to focus on what God says about you. The quickest way to forget what intimidation and failure, the quickest way to forget what that divorce said about you, the quickest way to forget what that diagnosis says about you, the quickest way to forget what that bankruptcy says about you, what your kids say about you, what your in-laws say about you, is to focus on what God says about you. It's the second most important thing you'll ever decide in your life. The first, like we said, who is God? And the second, who does God say that I am? That's exactly the tension that Daniel had to live in. Culture was saying, I'm one thing. Politics and government and power, the powers that be were saying I'm one thing, but God was saying I'm something different. And Daniel had to decide which voice is true. Which voice is true? And guess what? So do you. And so do I. When competing voices vie for your heart, when competing voices vie for the space in your mind and in your soul, you have to decide which voice deserves my heart. Which voice is the true voice? And so Daniel realized, I can't be pushed this far. You can push me, but you can't push me this far. And so they tell them now that they have to eat this food, and Daniel's worried because maybe it's not kosher, maybe it's been sacrificed to Babylonian gods. And so it says in verse 8, but Daniel was determined not to defile himself by eating the food and wine given to him by the king. He asked the chief of staff for permission not to eat these unacceptable things. Here's what Daniel had. Here's the Daniel had that every dark horse you'll ever meet, every dark horse all throughout history and in this text will ever have. Daniel had conviction. Here's what conviction is. Conviction is trusting God that God's ways are best even before you see the outcome. Conviction is trusting that God's ways are best even before you see the outcome. God, what you're asking me to do goes counterculture to what the people around me do. God, everybody's fudging the numbers to get a higher sales commission. God, everybody around me are cutting deals that way. Everybody's family operates that way. God, everybody in my friend circle are making those choices. God, everybody in the office is living this way. Look, conviction says that when everything around me goes one way and God's calling me to go a different way, I'm going to trust that this way is the best way, even when I don't know what'll happen. I might lose a job over it. I might lose a sale over it. I might lose some friends over it. And Daniel might have lost his life over it. Because you disagree with a king and the king's people, and the king could just take you out. But Daniel had conviction. He knew who he was, and he knew what God had said about him, and he knew what God required of him. And that was everything to him. But like Daniel, for us, conviction's not enough. Like just belief and faith and trusting God yourself's not enough. So look at what verse 18 through 20 says. We've underlined some words so you can get like the main idea of this passage, things to really pay attention to. When the training period ordered by the king was completed, the chief of staff brought all the young men to King Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and no one impressed him as much as Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the royal service. Whenever the king consulted them in any manner requiring wisdom and balanced judgment, he found them 10 times more capable than any of the magicians and enchanters in his entire kingdom. What stands out about that passage? Them. Here's what Daniel knew, that we gotta get as people of faith. Faith is a private decision, but it is a public lifestyle. Christianity is a team sport. Being a dark horse, doing great things for God are not gonna be done by yourself. We weren't meant to live life alone. We're better together. Let's put this in real life. Okay, you would never, let's say you're starting a company or a department at your job. You would never like go on, Indeed.com or whatever and look at all the resumes and find the people least qualified for the job, interview all them and pick the worst candidates and say, you're hired. Like we'd never do that, right? Okay, another one. Like you would never go to the gym and say you're gonna play in a pickup basketball game and you see some people warming up and like this group over here like shot 5 or 6 air balls in a row, okay? You'd never go, my team, that's my people. Come on guys, let's go win the ring. You'd never do that. You'd never pick the wrong team for your sports team or your teams at work. Okay, who's your team in life? Who are the them that you're walking through life with? See, Daniel had some incredible thems. If you know about these 3 young Hebrew boys, these are the same 3 Hebrew boys that just a few chapters down the road are going to be thrown into a fiery furnace for their faith in Jesus and then come out with no injuries at all and whose story we've told for thousands and thousands of years. Daniel had the right them. Do you have the right them in your life? And I've been incredibly blessed. God has put some incredible thems in my life. When I was in college, I was 19 and I was in college in Lakeland. My family was in Alabama. And I got a call one night from my brother-in-law who is not a phone guy, okay? He's a mechanic from Alabama. I think he said 12 words in his whole life, and like 7 of those were, yep. He's just not a phone guy, but he called me one night, it's like 10 o'clock, and he says, Josh, I think you need to sit down. And I said, Bobby, what's going on? He said, your mom's in the hospital. And I said, what's happened? He said, well, your mom and your stepdad got into a fight. There was alcohol involved. It's really, really bad. She's not doing great. Okay, in that moment, like I can't tell you the fear that overcame me. I can't tell you the anger that overcame me. Y'all, I wasn't praying using holy words when I found out another man put my mom in a hospital, right? It wasn't pretty, right? It wasn't nice. It was anger and fear and rage and frustration. I was mad that I couldn't be there. And so I hung up the phone. I didn't know what I was going to do. And the dorm that I lived in was like a square dorm. And in the middle, there was a courtyard of grass, made out of grass. They never cut the grass. It was kind of like where they filmed the movie Lost, you know? So you go out. I went out there often to pray. And this night I went out there and I'm praying. And I'm just so angry and afraid and hurt. This is my mom, you know? I'm a mama's boy. It's my mom. And at the time, that semester, I was working 40 hours a week as a server. I ran all of the outreach ministries at my college. I was an associate youth pastor at a church down the road, and I was taking 17 credit hours of class. So I just hit the end of me, right, in that moment. So as I'm walking around in the grass, I see this like shiny piece of metal over at a distance, and I walk over. It got my attention, so I picked it up, and I looked at it. And no hyperbole, true story. As sure as I'm sitting right here, I looked at it and it said, caution. It had fallen from an electrical box. It said, caution, contents under extreme pressure might explode. You ever just know God's talking to you? You just know, like you just know. I just knew. And I said, okay. All right, God, I hear you. What do I do? What do I do? I prayed that prayer. God, what do I do? Maybe you're praying that prayer right now. Maybe you're walking through some stuff like Daniel's walked through. Maybe you're facing the darkest season in your life, the most uncertainty, the most fear, the most failure, the most pain. And your prayer is, God, what do I do? I went back in my room, and while I was out yelling and belly aching and throwing words at God, my roommate Joe, who's one of my best friends to this day, was getting all my friends together. When I got back, there's a whole group of people in my dorm room, and they put me right in the middle and they prayed for me. That's the right them. That's the right them. People that will be there and mourn and weep with you on your worst days and celebrate you and high five you and at you on Twitter and Facebook and compliment you on your best days. That's the right them. I so want for you to have the right them in your life. It's so the will and plan of God for you to have the right them in your life. And maybe you've been hurt by some thems. Maybe some of those thems have been Christians, called themselves Christians, and you're a little bit apprehensive on the whole them thing. I understand that stepping into a them relationship again is a little bit full of trepidation and fear. I get the feeling of being trigger shy. But here's the deal. What if when people saw this logo in our community, what if they said, that's the right them? When nobody else believes in me, they believe in me. When nobody else will walk through life with me, they will walk through life with me. What if every teenager in Tarrant and Denton counties heard the words, you matter to God and you matter to me, from somebody with one of these stickers on the back of their car? What if these people were the best tippers in all of the DFW area? All the servers said amen, right? What if we were the best neighbors? What if people said, I don't necessarily agree with their theology, but I want to hire them. I want them to marry my daughter. I sure hope one of these people is my kid's babysitter, because these people know how to love. These people will show up on your best day and on your worst day. I want to encourage you, like a good step to becoming that is grab one of these stickers and put it on the back of your car and let it remind you to be them for the people in our city. Now, let me make a disclaimer here. If you're going to cut people off and point to heaven with your middle finger, don't put this on your car, right? Please don't do that. I want the right them for you, and I want to be the right them for our community. Listen, if you're here and you're not connected and you don't have that them, I want to encourage you, go to Discover Compass in a couple of weeks. Like find out more about who we are and what we do, how to get in a community group or on a serve team. Like take a step. I know it's scary, but take a step towards other people, because sometimes when we take a step towards other people, we're actually taking a step towards God. Here's what Daniel found out. Daniel found out that dark horses aren't lone rangers. Dark horses aren't lone rangers. Find any story of anybody who ever did anything great, and you'll find a team of people who invested in them and loved them and supported them. I want that team for you. I want to be that team for the community. I want to be known for that. Can we be known for that? Instead of being known for what we're against, can we be known for what we're for? Can we be that we're for people? There's a lot of things we could talk about that we don't like this, and the Bible says this. Let's just be known for being for people and just let it be simple and be that. Jesus said this, they'll know you're my disciples by how you love one another. Not by your theology, not by your programs, not by your ability to argue your faith. No, not by your songs, even though they're great, not by your sermons, even though I hear that guy's good looking. None of those things. He said, you'll be known as my disciples. The world will know around you that I'm real because of how you love, because of how you love. So let's be those people. Here's the deal. I've seen so many people just fall off the wagon and fall off the map in church for this very reason, what I'm about to say. Church is not an event to attend. It's a people to belong to. So many people have come to church, stayed for a little while, disconnected, went to another one, disconnected, or gave God another chance, disconnected, because this is how we often view church. If church is an hour on a Sunday or Thursday, the minute I say something you don't like, you're out. The minute it's not warm enough or cold enough, the minute when the coffee's too cold or too hot, the minute when the air conditioning's not great, the minute when they sing a song you don't like, the minute when somebody offends you or says something you don't like. Like, what if Jesus would have bailed on the whole faith thing because one of his best friends, I don't know, tried to kill him? No, it's not an event. It's not an hour on a Sunday. If it is an hour on a Sunday, the minute that hour is not convenient, we're out. It's not that, it's people. And I want for church to be so much more than an hour. I want it to be people that show up for you in your life. So I'm gonna beat that dark horse until I can't beat it anymore. Get plugged in, get plugged in, get plugged in, get plugged in. Okay, so like we said earlier, the tension Daniel faced was, I'm living here. I'm this citizen of Babylon now, but not by choice. I'm the citizen of the kingdom of heaven. And the kingdom of heaven is requiring one thing out of me. And Nebuchadnezzar and Darius, now the new king, are requiring other things out of me. And I have to decide where my allegiance is. And they figured out the way to get Daniel was to go at his faith and his walk with God. And so they said, anybody that prays to anybody other than Darius, the new king, will be killed. Well, we know about Daniel now. Conviction is like his superpower, okay? Daniel's not gonna bow down. So Daniel prays, but not to Darius. He prays to Jesus, Jehovah, his God. And they sure enough, they're true to their promise. They threw Daniel in a pit with some lions, in a den full of lions. And Darius actually liked Daniel, the king. He didn't hate him, he really liked him. Daniel at this point is now near 70. When we started this story, Daniel was 16, 17. So Daniel had been serving a lot of Babylonian kings, and finally it gets to Darius. So Darius came in the next day. He was the first one there to see what happened to Daniel, and he shows up and he goes, Daniel, you alive down there? And Daniel's like, man, best night of sleep I ever had. Thanks for the lion pillows. That's not what it says. But I imagine that's what it says. This is what Daniel says. He says, my God has sent his angel to shut the lion's mouth so they would not hurt me. And I've been found innocent in his sight, and I've not wronged you, your majesty. Don't miss what he said right there. What he said is, hey, king, listen, I had a choice to make. I had to choose, do I put my God first or you first? And I put God first, but here's what you need to know. While I'm living in Babylon, I'm primarily a citizen of the kingdom of heaven, and these two things don't have to be at odds with each other. In other words, I can be a Christian and be nice on social media. Right? I can be a Christian and be nice, having conversations about politics and in traffic and all this. When fear says one thing and faith says something else, I can trust faith. When my circumstances say one thing and my dreams say another, I can trust my dreams. When these two kingdoms are opposing forces, I can remain true, is what Daniel said. I can hold fast to what God has asked me to do. Now, again, like we said at the very beginning, when you think about Daniel, even if you didn't grow up in church, even if like me, I'd never read a Bible until I was 17. If you heard no stories like me, you might have heard that when we talk about Daniel, we say Daniel and the lion's den, right? They're synonymous, Daniel and the lion's den. That's not the point of the story. I sure hope you don't define your story like that. Carlos and the divorce. Amy and the bankruptcy. Charles and the failed business. Sarah and the crazy teenagers. I hope you don't define your story like that, because the lion's den is just a scene in the story. It's not the whole story. Don't let a scene define your life. Nebuchadnezzar coming in and trying to change his name, that wasn't the whole story. That was a scene in the story. You can't let scenes, moments, events change the whole course of your life. You have to stand with conviction. I know who God says I am. I know what God said he wanted me to be and do, and I know that I've got people around me to support me. Daniel's story is not about the lion's den. It's about the fact that he came out of the lion's den. When we tell that story, we shouldn't say Daniel in the lion's den. That's terrible shorthand. What we should say is Daniel, a man who prayed and trusted God even when it was absolutely counterintuitive and even costly, up to the point where he might lose his life, still trusted God even when he got thrown in the lion's den, had a great night's sleep, walked out of the lion's den, and changed history. That's how we should tell Daniel's story. Because Daniel trusted who God said he was, and Daniel believed that the voice of God and the people God put him around him would see him through anything he could ever face. And the same is true of you, and the same is true of me. There will be lion's dens. You can't control that. There will be pushback from culture. You can't control that. There will be voices that try to define you. They won't stop trying. But who does God say you are? And who are the them that God wants to put in your life or has put in your life? So when you've done everything to stand, you can have some people who stand with you. Get those two things right, and I promise you there's nothing you face that you can't stand up in. Those two things right. Get this right and get this right. And I promise you, everything else will work itself out for you like it did for Daniel. It may not be easy, may be tough. I'm sure being in a lion's den wasn't fun, but he made it out the other side, and so will you. Let me pray for you. God, in Jesus' name, I thank you so much for my new friends here and those watching online. I thank you that your plan for them, your thoughts for them, when you think about them, it's good. It's good. It's not bad. There's no shame attached. There's no fear attached. There's no hate attached. When you have thoughts about us, they're good. When you have thoughts about our future, they're good. And so I pray that we would find out and figure out who you've called us to be and hold fast to that. I pray for everyone here that, God, you'd help us get connected, to have the right them in our lives. Maybe we got the right them in our job, the right them in our pickup team, but we don't have the right them in our life. I pray we'd take that step, find the right them in Jesus' name.